Well, good afternoon, good Saturday afternoon, Nonfiction Branders. It's me, DP Knudten, and if it's Saturday and I'm going live, it's because I've got a podcast to edit. And here's the thing, I'm cheap dad. Just about everybody who knows me knows that I have 3 daughters, 2 of whom are in college and another one's on the way in the fall, which means all my money, which I never see because my wife handles all our finances, immediately goes other places than to myself. Therefore, everything I do needs to be done very economically and ideally by myself. You know, I like to say it's DP DIY, DP do it yourself. And that's exactly what I've been doing with my podcast, the Nonfiction Brand podcast, for, I think we're on episode 137 that I'm going to be editing today. That means it's over 2 years that I've been doing this podcast. And I've been doing it successfully because I've actually gotten my butt in this chair every single Saturday to edit my podcast for premiering on every Monday. The Nonfiction Brand podcast gets uploaded to Podbean, my podcast host of choice, and it premieres on Mondays at 3 a.m. I think it's Eastern time. Maybe it's Central time. I don't know. But it's 3 in the morning. Why? Because insomniacs need to fall asleep, and what's better than listening to my voice to make that happen? No, actually, there's more to it than that. But anyway, the podcast goes live at 3 a.m., but only if I have that podcast edited. So that's what I'm here to do today. And because I'm cheap dad, I'm using the cheapest of, well, maybe not the cheapest, because you do have to buy an Apple laptop or desktop to get it, but I'm using GarageBand, which is Apple's audio editing software. It's great for music creation. It's really quite good for, what am I talking about? For podcast editing as well. I just needed to close out of a program that you don't need to see. And I find it's really great. It has the power I need without the power that can get me into trouble. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes things that are too powerful can really screw you up. For example, the best example I can give you is a chainsaw. Fantastic tool unless it goes into your leg and takes it off. In order to make sure that I don't take off my audio leg, I use this relatively simple program that still has a lot of power. And I said that, as I said, that is GarageBand's Apple's GarageBand software. So I'm going to open that up and get right in it. Hold on as it pops up. This is episode 137 with Rajiv Nathan. And let me move this over here. I've got to get everything arranged because I wanted to show you how I open everything up from the file itself. Now, as you can see, I've already done one episode with Rajiv. And that was episode 136. So all I did was I copied the file into a new folder, labeled it episode 137. And now I need to get rid of some things before I go any further. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of all these little dots because that's indicating my volume levels for the track. And Rajiv, because this was recorded on Zoom, I think basically he should be at 0. He's down a little bit, so I'm going to bump him back up to 0. 0.0 or Unity. That's where I'm plugging his track, but you'll look at mine and there's a little bit of dipping here and there. I'm going to get rid of those dots too by highlighting them and deleting them. And then just for grins, I'm going to get rid of that dot as well, if it will let me do that. I just tap it once and goodbye forever. Now, I'm going to get out of the automation section by unclicking that, and I'm going to get rid of last week's episode simply by doing that. Yep, I'm confident I can do that because I've copied this file from last week's file, and this is a fresh episode file that I can go straight into editing with. But I do need to move it a little bit closer to the beginning of the start of this thing. And because I've done this so often, I know that I should start my new episode about 2 seconds in. And there we go. Get down to the second level without going into the millisecond level. And I know we didn't start exactly right, so I'm going to do something here, which is I'm going to mute my music so I can focus solely on the start of this. So let me see if this is set up right with Ecamm Live. We'll find that out in a second. All right, so I need to set my system audio because it's not exactly right. Yep, output device, input device. Why wouldn't that? External headphones. Those are my speakers. System audio. GarageBand. Oh, let's check Ecamm Live. System default external headphones. Dell. Speakers fine. Stream. Nope. Sometimes they make some changes and broadcast system audio all the time. So it should be, if I can hear it, you should be able to hear it. So let me see if that's true. That's odd. I'm not seeing the system audio playing in Ecamm Live. And let's make sure. Output device, external. Scarlet input device. Hold on. Let me go over here. I'm in my, this is my confidence monitor, if you will. I can see if I am in fact going out. Yep. So check 1, 2. Let me bring stream that audio up. Okay. I can see if I am in fact going out. I'm checking audio. Yep. So check 1, 2. Let me bring stream that audio up. Okay. I can see if I am. Hold on. Stand by. Going out. I'm checking audio. Yep. So check 1, 2. Let me bring stream that audio. Yeah, you can't hear audio. I can see if I am. Hold on. Stand by. Going out. I'm checking audio. Yep. So check 1, 2. Let me bring stream that audio. Yeah, you can't hear audio. Audio routing is the bane of my existence, and if I can't get this figured out, I might have to stop, because you can't, you certainly can't do anything if you can't hear anything. So yeah, you can't hear audio. Audio routing is the bane of my existence, and if I can't get so you can hear that, I might have to stop, because Ecamm, why aren't you working right? Well, you certainly can't do anything if you can't hear anything. So yeah, you can't hear audio. All right, so I'm gonna. Audio routing is the bane of my existence, and if I can't so you can hear that, I might have to stop, because Ecamm, why aren't you working right? Well, you certainly can't do anything if you. All right, so I have proven that I can't do this the way I wanted to today because my audio routing is screwed up. Audio routing is, how do I get my voice in? How do I get the stuff that's in GarageBand? Let me see where GarageBand is going. It should be going. I don't get it. Hold on. And let me figure out what the problem is here. Output device. I'm just going to system setting. How about that? Let's see what happens. And that's in GarageBand. So great outline about. This kills me every time I change a setting, something screws up, and then all of a sudden all I have to do is put it back to system setting. I need to stop messing with my settings, don't I? Yeah, I do. So anyway, we're cool. Let's get back into this. All right. What do I want to do? I want to show you guys what I am doing. That's what I want to do. So, okay, so I've got 2 seconds up here in the front, right? And let's see how that goes. Okay, so you are so gracious to have created. Okay, so I'm going to take out a little bit of that gap. Okay, so you are so gracious. I want to get that tempo. Okay, so you are so gracious. You are so gracious. Okay, I don't need the okay. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to highlight both tracks. I'm going to move it just a tad over that way. And bring it up there. Okay, let's listen. Okay, so you are so. So you are so. Let me show you this. If I have both of these highlighted, see what happens when I try to shorten that track. It shortens the other segment right behind it. Don't do that. The only way to do that is to highlight only the segment you want to shorten and drag it back so I can bring it back here. I'm going to make the music bed live. I am going to hit the, what they call this button again? I don't know. Move track. This is the show hide automation button, and that is the catch playhead button, which means that the playhead, well, you'll see what it does in a second. So here we go. So you are so gracious to have created a. All right, so that's fine. I think I'm loud enough, although I'm going to go to the end of my music track where it's really quite quiet. Make sure that that's like that, and just going to ramp it because there's a little bit of music involved. So you are so gracious to have created a one-sheet device that listeners of the Nonfiction Brand podcast can go online and download right now at, give us that URL.
Startuphypeman.
All right, at, give us that URL. That's fine. And then he did a kind of startup hype man thing that had a little bit of weirdness. At, give us that URL.
Startuphypeman.com/DP.
As in David Paul. Definitely check that out because I think. So. Give this just a little bit of goose. You can see I'm moving those buttons there just to create the region that I want to give a little goose to.
Hypeman.com/DP.
As in David Paul. Definitely check that out because I think it gives a great. All right, so that great outline about. It gives a great outline. Sometimes there's a little haltingness in even my speaking, and I'll tighten it up just to give it a little bit more flow. David Paul. Definitely check that out because I think it gives a great outline about, or, you know, it kind of gives us a picture of how your brain. Okay, it gives a great outline about, or, you know, it kind of gives us a picture of how. Because it gives us. Check that out because I think it gives a great outline about, or, you know, it kind of gives us. Let's see what happens if I do this. Get rid of that kind of weirdness and just tighten it up. Check that out because I think it gives a great, you know, it kind of gives us a picture. Let's see, you know. Definitely check that out because I think it gives it kind of gives us a picture of how your brain, as in David Paul. Definitely check that out because I think it gives I think it gives, that's so let's see, I want to overlap this a little. As in David Paul. Definitely check that out because I kind of gives us a picture of how your brain, because it kind of, David Paul. Definitely check that out because it kind of gives us a picture of, okay, so it kind of gives us a picture. I want it. Whoop. Always Command Z. Command Z is our friend. Because it. Paul. Definitely check that out because I kind of gives us a picture of. Because I would. Paul. Definitely check that out because I think it kind of gives us a picture of how your brain. The brain fills in it. Paul. Definitely check that out because I think it kind of gives us a picture of how your brain works and what your value is as a provider of services. Just tightening up a little stuff. Now, I do this because I care. Value is as a provider of services or guidance or counsel to especially startup companies. Do you have any specific startup sectors that you're focused on most acutely? Okay, so there's a long pause there. I can just shorten that up a little bit. And even though I'm going to do some finished polishing in Audacity, which is another program after this, I still like to have it reasonably close to where, finish should be. Any specific startup sectors that you're focused on most acutely?
In the realm of the companies that are scaling up, I almost exclusively work.
I love to get rid of the uhs because it annoys me as a listener, and it also makes my guests sound smarter, which they do appreciate.
In the realm of the companies that are scaling up, I almost exclusively work with B2B SaaS companies or marketplace technology companies where there's a B2B side of their platform. When it's the early stage companies who are like, hey, I just need to get my initial pitch down, or I'm looking to raise money, I have worked with.
I have, so I can get rid of an I get rid of his repetitive I's, again, making him sound smarter.
Like, hey, I just need to get my initial pitch down, or I'm looking to raise money. I have worked with everything from a food technology.
I've worked with everything. And again, this is a tempo thing. I don't do this for every person because everybody has their own speaking style, but I do try to move it a little faster because the human brain can hear and understand faster than people can talk. Therefore, you don't need as many pauses as a lot of people put in there.
I'm looking to raise money. I have worked with everything from a food technology company, or like a food mobile app, to a company bringing an alternative meat product to market, to a company that is working in alcohol.
Okay, so we got I may not be able to remove all the uhs, but I think I might be able to because, okay, if you look here at the waveform, and keep in mind that my voice is on top. I'm not saying anything, so it's flat. My guest Rajiv is on this track 2. There's a little bit of gap there, so I'm gonna show you by doing it to both tracks, but I'm thinking the might be there. Let's see.
That is working in.
That is
working.
That is, and then shorten this up. Thought he had 2 uhs in here. Let's see.
That is working in alcohol.
Okay, there's that other I can get rid of this too, because it's discrete, meaning it's not connected to the previous word. And if you pay attention to me enough on these live edits, you'll learn this saying. If it is discrete, you can delete. Meaning, if someone is talking like this and says, my dog's name is Olive, Tilly, it's easy to take Olive out because it's my dog's name is space, Olive, space, Tilly. I'll be able to take Olive out, get rid of get rid of that, and put Tilly. My dog's name is Tilly without a problem because they aren't touching. If I say my dog's name is Olive, especially Olive, it's a mess, and you can do it sometimes, but not much. But if it is discrete, meaning not attached to the word before or after, you can delete, and I guarantee it. All right, back to where we were.
Working in alcohol addiction recovery. Honestly.
Okay, so there's another and one of this is interesting too. After having so many guests, the people who do this more often have fewer ums and ahs because they're aware of it. The people who do public speaking frequently don't fill every space with an so, well, weirdness. They just know that sometimes you have to stop to give emphasis to what was said before and after that sentence. Did I say anywhere in there? No, I didn't, because I'm paying attention. Plus, the fact is, I've cut out thousands of ums while editing. And once you've done that, you're very concerned about how many times you say in regular life, which is actually one of the best levels up professionally. Because if you're a like person, like, or you come off less confident, less polished, and frankly, not fair, but true, a little less intelligent. I'm not kidding. That's why I take the ums, the so's, and the knows out of my guests' track. I want them to sound more expert, more professional, more confident. And the best way to do that, get rid of those temporary words or those pause words, those hold words that make them sound a little bit stupid.
To a company that is working in alcohol addiction recovery, honestly, like across the board on that side.
So there's an see, nothing before it, nothing after it. If it is discrete, you can delete. And look, I can get rid of that big gap too. Sometimes you want a gap because you want them to be able to think about their answer, but let's see if they need as big a gap as there was.
Like across the board on that side, it's really a matter of, hey,
Okay, so there's an it. Do you see that little hiccup? Get rid of the hiccup. Tighten it up a little bit.
Honestly, like across the board on that side, it's really a matter of, hey, do you look at your pitch and say, this kind of sucks?
It's really a matter of,
hey, do you look at your,
of, hey,
really a matter of, hey, do you look at your pitch and say, this kind
really a matter of, you look at your pitch, hey, I have no idea what those words were. So let's just see what this sounds like.
You look at your side, it's really a matter of, you look at your pitch and say, this kind of sucks. And if that's the case, then that's where I can help.
Right. So it's really not about any specific sector or subsector. It's about the screaming need for any startup, which is, how do we tell people what we do, how we do it, and who we are? Okay, I heard a little bit of how we do it. Did you hear that? So I'm gonna, that might have been a little bit of vocal puff. How do we tell people what we do, how we do it? Did you hear that? That felt very cut off though. I wonder, let's see. We tell people what we do, how we do it. That's better. And who we are when we're still forming a lot of that stuff, or it's being shaped day to day. I mean, and I've seen plenty of okay, that which I said is not needed, so let's get rid of it. I'm leaving a little bit of the gap because it's between two major thought groupings. Call them paragraphs, if you will. It's being shaped day to day. And I've seen plenty of startup decks that are just screaming bags of fiction. I mean, it's almost like cut and paste out of pure ether of. Okay, I'm struggling for words. You don't need to see all that struggle. Because again, if you don't see that struggle, then you'll think I'm all that more brilliant. Which is always what I'm trying to do, right? I mean, it's almost like cut and paste. Fiction. It's almost like cut and paste. Okay, that you. Don't need the you. It is discrete. I can delete. Highlight both tracks, pull it back, grab all the tracks behind it, and close it up. And by the way, I'm doing this pretty easily and effectively because I'm using an Apple Magic Trackpad, and I just bought this. So this is my second one. I love them because you can do the pinch pull stuff that you've learned to do on your phone as an input device. I've used mice, I've used trackballs. This is the best, especially for audio editing. Love it, love it, love it to death. And by the way, didn't get it for free. I paid for it, and I'm a cheap dad, in case you weren't listening earlier. I mean, bags of fiction. I mean, it's almost like cut and paste out of pure ether of, some screenwriter's mind or something. And it doesn't sound like that's what you're about. It sounds like what you're about is going a little bit deeper with a company to especially engage an audience so that they will be up for hearing the story you're about to tell.
Yeah, it actually, so.
Okay, so did you hear that tick? Get rid of it. It could be a lip smack or sometimes a teeth clash, a bite. Don't need it. So I'm going to have a little bit of gap between me talking and him talking, but let's see. For hearing the story you're about to tell.
Yeah, it actually, so kind of those like ridiculous claims that hits on another thing that I'm like a firm believer in, which is.
You're about to tell.
Yeah, it actually, so kind of those like ridiculous claims that hits on another thing that I'm like a firm believer in, which is, let me know if this scenario sounds.
Which is, let me know if this scenario sounds.
It's on another thing that I'm like a firm believer in, which is, let me know if this scenario sounds familiar. Like you get a cold email from someone like who's prospecting you, and they are like,
okay, so that gap is 50% too long. So I'm going to cut out 50% of it or so.
Like you get a cold email from someone like who's prospecting you, and they are like, oh, so-and-so used our product and had like 800% increase in sales, or, our customers are getting these kinds of results that are, it's just like some like insane number.
Some insane number. Again, just taking up some of the gap.
These kinds of results that are, it's just like some like insane number that you look at it and you're like, yeah, right. Or yeah, whatever, that's not for me. Right. Has that ever happened to you where you get an email like that?
Oh my God. Yeah. All the time, especially from what from. Okay. So that is right there. If I just do this, especially. Oh my God, yeah. All the time, especially from what I would call the slimier sections of LinkedIn connections.
Yeah, oh my God.
Okay, so that little blah blah. I want his haha, but I don't need the blah. And I can get rid of some of this to tighten it up. The slimier sections of LinkedIn connections.
Yeah, oh my God.
Okay, so that was a little tight. Pull it back. I don't think I need that. Connections.
Yeah, oh my God. Especially in those LinkedIn DMs, people are always touting stuff like that.
Yeah.
We helped so-and-so company book 49 meetings in their first 9 days. Booked 49 meetings.
Okay, so that little artifact in there can get rid of.
We helped so-and-so company.
Okay, so
that.
Yeah.
We helped so-and-so company.
That don't need that. So up on my track, I'm just going to keep the yeah which is part of the back and forth between me and Rajiv.
Is touting stuff like that.
Yeah.
We helped so-and-so company book 49 meetings in their first 9 days.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So-
I'm
Yeah. And I take. All right, so let's see. Yeah. And I take. He didn't say anything of import. It was just a couple of random noises almost.
First 9 days.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer.
Meetings in their first 9 days.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that
Yeah, I'm. Get rid of that first I. That first hump. I.
9 days.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that unbelievable stuff like that is not to be believed. It's unbelievable.
Well,
Okay, he said, well, I don't know if we need the well. Let's see.
Unbelievable.
yeah, that's true. Like what you're saying. A couple of years ago, I wrote
What you're saying. A couple years ago. Saying.
Yeah, that's true. Like what you're saying. A couple of years ago, I wrote this ebook on a principle I called the XY paradox. And the idea is exactly what you're saying. Most companies think, oh, hey, the way to convince them, the way to get them interested is to give them like our
Is to give them.
is to give them like our best case study or our best case studies and talk about like the extreme
The
best case studies and talk about like the extreme version of this product. Version of.
All right, so again, that's kind of discreet, so I can bring those together.
Like the extreme version of this product. Like they're the best use case of this product.
That's a long gap. I know that ahead of time. I don't even have to listen to know that I need to shorten it up.
Like they're the best use case of this product. And so they will say things, right? Like, oh, we help so-and-so book 20 meetings in their we help so-and-so book 20 meetings in their first 10 days or
shorten it up.
First 10 days or save this amount of cost, whatever it might be.
Save this amount of cost. Just gives it better tempo.
Or save this amount of cost, whatever it might be. The challenge is...
Did you hear that smack? Don't need the smack. Don't need the lip smack.
Cost, whatever it might be. The challenge is you're first off, you're operating with only within...
First off,
you're operating...
So he said, you're first off, I'm going to get rid of the long year.
The challenge is first off, you're operating with... The challenge is you're operating with only within the rational brain when you start to throw out numbers like that. And it just becomes really easily refutable to someone who's not already accustomed to you and familiar with you.
That's a long gap. Tighten it up a little.
Accustomed to you and familiar with you. And the first thing most people will do is dismiss it because they'll say, yeah, right, that's not true. Or they will say, okay,
that's not true. Tighten it. Because I want the energy to build.
Yeah, right, that's not true. Or they will say, okay, that may be true, but my situation is different. they will say, okay, that may be true, but my situation is different. That would never work for me. So you either rationalize against the validity of the claim, like the truth.
And again, tighten that up.
You either rationalize against the validity of the claim, like the truth of the claim, or you rationalize.
Can I get rid of some of that? Let's see.
Validity of the claim, like the truth of the
Validity
of the claim, like the truth of the
validity of like the truth of the. Let's see if I can do this. Leave the gap in for now.
It's the validity of like the truth of the claim.
Like it's the validity of the truth of the claim. And again, I'm doing this because it actually helps the listener understand what he's trying to say, and it makes him sound smarter, which is a win-win, especially for me, the podcast host that's trying to provide a lot of value with every single second of every single podcast.
Against the validity of the truth of the claim, or you rationalize how your own use case would be an exception to the rule and how it wouldn't work. And I call it the...
Okay, so going to let that land there a little bit. You'll notice, I'm going to tighten it up a little bit, but you'll notice the volume level down here, kind of at the big climatic end of his sentences, is way down. So I'm going to go into automation and just give this what I love to call a goose box. Because if you bring the volume up, you're goosing it. And if you want to bring it down, you're ducking it. So this is goose, duck. Got it? We're playing duck, duck, goose. But in this case, I'm going to goose that signal a little bit just to give that a little bit more heat. And we're going to listen.
This would be an exception to the rule and how it wouldn't work. And
all right, that could probably be even a little higher.
Case would be an exception to the rule and how it wouldn't work. And
we could even maybe step it like this.
Case would be an exception to the rule and how it wouldn't work.
There you go. Wouldn't work. You can hear that better by changing the automation of the volume. And as you can see right there, that's volume. I'm goosing it in 2 steps because wouldn't's a little bit louder than work, and I don't want it to be wouldn't work. I want it to be, very similar in volume. So let's take a look.
Be an exception to the rule and how it wouldn't work. And I call it the X to Y paradox is because in that case, DP, you who got the email or the LinkedIn message, your current state is variable X, the letter X. And what they pitch to you when they give you those amazing results is a state of Y, like variable Y.
Well, I'm going to write down this time stamp because I need to do a clip for my audiogram that I use to market this podcast. I create one of those things that has the quote and then the little VU meter stuff going on to indicate that it's a file. It's actually a video file, but it has sound. And I like what he's saying here about the XY thing, so I want to get a start on that.
Your current state is variable X. Because in that case, DP.
All right, so let's see.
And I call it the X to Y.
I call it the XY, and that's at 420,680. And let's see where it goes.
I call it the X to Y paradox is because in that case, DP.
Okay, there was some weirdness in there because
the X to Y paradox is because in that case.
Paradox. See this little garbage, or hold on, I'll show you. This little garbage right here. I want to get rid of that because I think I can aid in comprehension by removing it. Some of the confusion there.
And I call it the X to Y paradox because in that.
Okay, there's a paradox. That's what let's see.
Is because.
Boxes. I think what I might be able to do is like marry that up and make it paradox.
In that case, call it the X to Y paradox because...
Okay, that's a little bit weird. Zoom in a little. You see how it kind of crescendos up? I'm going to get rid of some of that little weirdness there. Tighten it up and back and listen back.
Y paradox because...
Okay, let's go back here.
And I call it the X to Y paradox because in that case...
Okay, there's X to Y paradox. Maybe it's because that's too long.
Call it the X to Y paradox because in that case...
That was a little too short. Give it a little bit more. Marry it up. Listen.
I call it the X to Y paradox because in that case...
Yeah, that'll work. Call it the X to Y paradox because...
Call it the X to Y paradox because in that case, DP, you who got the email or the LinkedIn message, your current state is variable X, the letter X. And what they pitch to you when they give you those amazing results is a state of Y, like variable Y. And there's just too much distance between X and Y for you to be able to make that mental jump.
Okay. Yeah, I want to marry these up for you to be able to make that mental jump. Okay, listen.
And there's just too much distance between X and Y for you to be able to make that mental jump. And so instead what you want...
So shorten that by half just to keep things moving along.
Distance between X and Y for you to be able to make that mental jump. And so instead what you want to do is what I...
That was a little tight, so back it off a little.
Able to make that mental jump. And so instead what you want to do is what I call the X plus 1 effect, which is talk about incremental gain. Because that's actually...
Okay, so that's 253. Let me see where that ended.
Instead, what you want to do...
Yeah, so right before instead.
For you to be able to make that mental jump.
Okay, that's 140. Can go a little longer because that's 20 seconds.
And so instead, what you want to do is what I call the X plus 1 effect, which is
tighten this up.
Is what I call the X plus 1 effect, which is talk about incremental gain. Because that's actually something... Talk about incremental gain. Because that's actually something people can believe and believe enough to want to hear more.
All right, so that's where I would want to stop it. 458, 057, 057. That might be a little long, but I'll deal with that tomorrow or later today.
That's actually something people can believe and believe enough to want to hear more.
Okay, so there was a little bit of...
Something people can believe and believe enough to...
And believe enough, so there's an extra word in there that's just plain not needed.
Gain. Because that's actually something people can believe and believe enough to want to hear more. And the way you talk about incremental gain...
Okay, so this is kind of a new paragraph. So I want a longer gap, but not that long. And I want to keep people interested, so tighten this up.
Believe enough to want to hear more. And the way you talk about incremental gain is don't even lead with numbers. About incremental gain is don't even lead with numbers. Lead with qualitative result. Talk about how...
Oh, I might want to grab that. Let me...
And the way you talk about incremental gain is don't even lead with...
Okay, so let's go incremental gain. Gain, that's at 4, 5, 7, 833.
And the way you talk about incremental gain is don't even lead with numbers.
Up. Not super tight, but just a little bit.
Is don't even lead with numbers. Lead with qualitative result.
Qualitative
result.
Oops.
Result.
Sometimes Zoom will do this where they kind of put a hiccup in here. It's like the end of qualitative should have been married up like that. So listen.
Numbers. Lead with qualitative result. Talk about how someone is enjoying using your product. And by the way, they're getting, like recently they had this small win. You don't have to say small win, but give them a small win of some kind.
Okay, so I'm going to take out a little bit of time here, but I think this will also be the end of this clip. So this will be 513, 514, 146.
By the way, they're getting, like recently they had this small win. You don't have to say small win, but give them a small win of some kind. Because that's going to convince.
What is that? I have no idea.
Give them a small win of some kind.
Give them a small win. Let's see if this makes sense.
Small win. You don't have to say small win, but give them a small win. Because that.
Give them a small win and give them a small win.
Small win. You don't have to say small win, but give them a small win. Because that.
Give them a small win because that.
Small win. You don't have to say small win, but give them a small win. Because that's going to convince someone like you to say, okay, they're not full of crap. And I can actually take a meeting with them and want to learn more about them.
Okay, so that big is out there by itself. And what do we say? If it is discrete, you can delete. So I got rid of that big and a lip smack.
Take a meeting with them and want to learn more about them. An example of this
So
learn more about them. An example of this that actually I.
Okay, see that That looks like mitochondria. That's what it reminds me of from biology class. Mitochondria, the engine of the cell, right? For energy in the cell.
An example of this that actually I did recently in an email that.
Did it sound like this?
An example of this that actually I did.
See that hiccup in there? Right there? Join them together. Because that's a Zoom artifact. Believe me, I'm not complaining about Zoom because I get what I pay for. I pay for nothing. Well, I get a lot more than I pay for because I pay $0 and I get someone from Chicago talking to me in real time.
Example of this that actually I did recently in an email that got a meeting.
That
email that got a meeting.
So that when you can remove repetitive words like that, again, you make your client, your guests sound smarter.
That actually I did recently in an email that got a meeting was I gave my like upfront like, hey, here's why I want to meet, and it follows actually that K-PASA form. Hey, here's why I want to meet. Follows actually that K-PASA.
Ooh, that actually had it follows. That it's something like, here's who I want to meet.
Why I want to meet. It follows actually that K-PASA formula that's in that guide. It's a formula that's in that guide. But then when I get to the part. That's in that guide. But then when I get to the part. That's in that guide. But then when I get to the part where I'm like, customer example. Part where I'm like, customer example. All I said was, hey, customer example. All I said was, hey, we launched this recently.
Hey. All I said was, hey, we launched this recently.
All I said was, hey, we launched this recently at SearchSpring. At SearchSpring. Here's what a few of the at SearchSpring. Here's what.
See, sometimes you need a little bit of room.
At SearchSpring. Here's what a few of their team members. Spring. Here's what a few of their team members said.
Okay. A few of the
A few of their team members said. Their team members said. Their team members.
Few of the. See if this works.
Here's what a few of their team members said. Marketing director.
Team
member said.
Okay, that I can't help that. The
marketing director said this. SDR said this. CEO, who's honestly a perennial. Said this. CEO, who's honestly a perennial skeptic, even said, "I don't hate it." Right, and the best I said was the CEO said, "I don't hate it." And then I the best I said was the CEO said, "I don't hate it." And then I close out.
And then I close down.
The best I said was the CEO said, "I don't hate it." And then I close out the email from there. And that's what that helps convince the person that okay, this is a real thing that I could consider. Because I wasn't like the CEO, that I could consider. Because I wasn't like the CEO, oh my God, he fawned. I mean, and he was happy with it, but he is a perennial skeptic, and his initial feedback was, "I don't hate it." And he does like it a lot, but the extent he was going to tell me was, "I don't hate it." So, right, I'm not coming in being like, you know what, SearchSpring had.
Being like, SearchSpring.
Right, I'm not coming in being like, you know what, SearchSpring had a 45% reduction in sales cycle time and a 45% increase in close rate, any of that stuff. I talked more to the qualitative result and just what people have said to me. And that's you can't argue with someone else's.
And that's what you can't argue.
And that's you can't argue with someone.
And that's, you can't argue.
What people have said to me. You can't argue with someone else's feedback.
Well, and I think that's also.
With someone else's feedback.
Well, and I think that's also based on the fact that a lot of the people who make up your audience in the startup world, they're number people. They're numbers gurus. They believe in the old saying, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And they know that 45. Damn lies and statistics. And they know that 40.
That was too tight. That was too tight.
Lies and statistics. And they know that
Actually, I think what I'm going to do is correct a little bit of timing here, because if I take his little ha-da-da-ha-da, his chuckle, I can move that a little closer to the remark.
Damn lies and statistics. And they know that 45% number came from someone. And statistics. And they know that 40.
It's all about timing. Timing.
Damn lies and statistics. And they know that 45% number came from someone's, fever dream or something. And and they can find the whole.
So he's got this weird, gonna get rid of that by doing a trim, a man T there.
And and they can find the whole.
And they can find the hole.
And they can find the.
Okay, so what I can do is this. Man T, both tracks, which puts a cut in, and then I can just overwrite
one's, fever dream or something. And they can find the holes faster than anything. But what they can't do is
It's a long pause. But what they can't do is
anything. But what they can't do is out liberal arts a liberal arts storyteller. And again, seriously, a lot of the companies you deal with, let me just ask you, how many of them
let me
deal with? Let me just ask you. Seriously, a lot of the companies you deal with, let me just ask you, how many of them have PhDs, scientists, engineers, and CS people, and CS people? Engineers and CS people in depth work. And CS people in depth working on them.
Oh, yeah.
In depth working on them.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I got it in depth. I'm losing the th, and I know why. This is going to loop this section over and over again because I want to look at something down here, my noise gate. Now, listen to this.
Johnny Depp.
My noise gate is cutting out some of the th. Oh, wow, it's at minus 40. If I go to 45, minus 45, am I going to get some in? There's a little bit. There's a danger here. Okay. A noise gate is basically a filter that says, as long as people are at least this loud, the sound is going through. But the second that it drops below a certain level, the volume drops out. So I'm talking. Do you see the gate effect that's going on there? As long as I'm talking, the gate is closed or is open. But the second that I stop talking, the gate closes. Why? Because like right now, my MacBook Pro running Ecamm Live to do this live stream is running pretty hot. The fans are going pretty crazy. And I don't want you to hear the whole time. So I have a noise gate that's part of my signal input into my computer that is set as, in the case of this noise gate, anything below minus 44 decibels will be gated out. So when I stop talking, you can't hear the of the fan because that's not above minus 44 decibels. In the case of this noise gate, this is set at 46 decibels because of this is an older recording and maybe I had things set differently. But anyway, I might be hearing some breath sounds from me because I've taken that noise gate and made it less sensitive. Let's see what happens.
CS people in depth working on them.
Oh, yeah. Most times it's found.
Did you hear that? Mm-mm. That's just cut it out. That grayed out thing is a old promo of mine that I don't want to get rid of, but I also don't want to listen to. So it's in what I call a buffer track, turned off.
Oh, yeah. Most times it's founded by someone who was like the product person, right? Like they were the engineer behind the product. Or they had,
Exactly.
like the data mined, yeah.
Exactly. So they can code the thing in their sleep, but they were sleeping during English class. Sleep, but they were sleeping during English class when they went through classic story structure or script analysis if they took any theater courses or anything like that, which of course they didn't take because they were in computer science. So that, you know, they know how to code. They don't know how to tell a story. And certainly they don't know how to tell their story. So it sounds to me like you are the guy who is the perfect one to get in there and ferret the
Get in there and ferret the truth. All right, we're coming up on 8 minutes. I know that my podcast is typically around 20 to 25 minutes long. I'm going to be looking for a spot for my promo. And my promo is for my new book. Oh, which happens to look. Oh, look at this. I have a copy of it right here. Can you believe it? Yeah. Nonfiction Brand. This is a commercial. This episode of GarageBand 101 is brought to you by Nonfiction Brand, my brand new book that's now available on Amazon as a paperback or, as of yesterday, a Kindle download. So you can get it via Kindle and save a few bucks at the same time. So definitely check that out at Amazon. Just search Nonfiction Brand and my last name, which you can see right there, and you will find the book, Nonfiction Brand. Discover, craft, and communicate the completely true, completely you brand you already are. Now available on Kindle as well as in paperback. Anyway, so I'm looking for a space for that promo, and right now I'm at 8 minutes. Ideally, it's around 10 minutes, so I'm just going to listen.
Who is the perfect one to get in there and ferret the true story of who they are, what they do, and how they do it, but also do the extra thing, which is put it through the prism of, and how do we tell this so that the audience is receptive to it, interested in it, and it frames the art.
And it frames,
interested in it, and it frames the arguments, takes them on a path.
Frames the argument. Get out of, there was a weird word in there that I didn't think fit, so I cut it out.
And it frames the arguments, takes them on a path that the ultimate.
On a path. That's a weird kind of artifacty thing, so make it smooth it out a little bit. Get out the sandpaper.
Frames the arguments, takes them on a path that the ultimate at the end, or the so that the ultimate climb.
So
that the ultimate at the end takes them on a path.
So that all that crap in there, I think, can be overwritten, and overridden. I overwrote it.
Takes them on a path so that the ultimate climax of the story is, we should talk in depth. And
in depth. Hear that? That's the problem with a gate. Sometimes you can lose that depth.
We should talk in depth and ideally engage with you.
Okay, tighten this up. All right, so I'm going to look for a kind of change of topic.
Ideally engage with you.
Yeah, it's through that prism, and and then even within that, it's also the prism of, okay, and then what does this look like if they're already on the phone? does this look like if they're already on the phone with you, or if they're in a demo? What does this look like if you're just trying to get their attention through an outbound email or message or call? What does this look like when you have to talk about examples of how customers have succeeded with you? Right? These are the
Okay, so right, that can be a lot closer.
Customers have succeeded with you, right? These are it's like from like your top funnel outreach to your bottom funnel closing. It's also like through those individual prisms. Like what
There's a lot of it's
funnel closing. It's also like through those.
Okay, so that center can go away.
Funnel outreach to your bottom funnel closing. It's also like through those individual.
It's also
like through those.
Okay, so it's
to your bottom funnel closing. It's also like through those
it's
also like through those.
See if it's
Funnel closing. It's also like through those
maybe what I can do is like that.
Funnel closing. It's also like through those
Did you hear the click? That's because there was a volume differential between two clips. Right there, there was a short spot.
Closing. It's also like through those individual prisms.
Did you hear that? That sounded clean.
Bottom funnel closing. It's also like through those individual prisms. Like what is the trickle down effect?
What it is?
Like what is the trickle?
See that extra what? Get rid of it.
Individual prisms. Like what is the trickle down effect into each of these layers of messaging? And the reason why I messaging. And the reason why I approach it that way is because as creative as I am, I'm also very like practical with like, you need something you can execute on. With like, you need something you can execute on. One of the biggest, I think, things I take.
Biggest things.
One of the biggest, I think, things I take issue with or that I've seen are like gaps that take issue with or that I've seen are like gaps that exist is there's a lot of people who are story minded, and there are people who are plenty more story minded than I am. I think that.
Okay, so don't need any of that
Than I am. Think the challenge.
Okay, so that was an I.
More story minded than I am. I think the challenge is that you have to do this well in this specific arena anyway. You got to be able to pair that with like, okay, but what does that mean in a day-to-day business sense?
Gap seems a little long to me.
Business sense, especially when
there's an in there.
A business sense, especially when sales need to be made. Like you know, one company that
like one company like
sales need to be made. Like, you know, one company that I've worked with.
Well, one company?
You know, one company that I've worked.
Like
one company that I've worked.
Okay, so I can cut that there, get rid of that. Like one company I've worked with.
Be made. Like one company that I've worked with.
Like one company I've worked with.
need to be made. Like one company that I've worked with.
That's a huge gap. Command T to trim, to put a cut in, then tighten it up.
One company that I've worked with, they were like, we had a PR. We had a PR.
None of that. And you get faster and faster the more you do this. There's no fast way to get better. It's just like practicing guitar. You got to practice. If you want to be a faster player, you got to practice, which is why I don't practice enough and I'm not a fast guitar player. But I enjoy playing guitar, and that's the most important thing.
Develop our narrative for us first. And so they had me look at it, and they were like, one company that I've worked with, we had a PR or whatever kind of agency. I think it was a PR agency come in and like develop our narrative for us first. And so they had me look at it, and they were like, I was like, okay, so like what?
They were like, I was like,
first. So they had me look at it, and they were like, I was like, okay, so like what do you want?
And they were like, so I
for us first. And so they had me look at it. I was like, okay, so like what do you want to use? And so they had me look at it. I was like, okay, so like what do you want to use out of this? Well, they gave us this, this 40-page PDF of. Like, what do you want to use out of this? Well, they gave us this, this 40-page PDF of like our different talking points. $40-page PDF of like our different talking points. And like the pitch that company. Of like our different talking points. And like the pitch that company came up with involved like using the phrase like we galvanize the employee spirit to achieve like monumental.
Get rid of the uhs, tighten it up.
Employee spirit to achieve, like monumental gains in engagement and gains in engagement.
So lose at least two of those ins.
Monumental gains in engagement and interaction. Monumental gains in engagement and interaction across the board. And I'm just like, but can you envision yourself?
And I'm just like, but can you envision yourself actually saying that?
Action across the board. And I'm just like, but can you envision yourself ever saying that to someone and keeping a straight face?
Right.
And that's where I'm just always like, how do we
get rid of my butt? Don't need my butt. My butt should not be in this podcast. Get rid of that butt. Don't be afraid to cut out your butt.
Great face.
Right.
And that's where I'm just always like, how do we actually bring this down to like tactical things you would actually say out of your mouth?
Right. Well, and luckily nonfiction.
So there's a tick here. Get rid of. This might be a good place for the promo. Let's see. Let's see where we go.
Luckily, nonfiction brand Luckily, nonfiction.
Yeah.
Luckily, nonfiction brand podcast listeners, I could edit these episodes because what you didn't hear me do was throw up.
Didn't hear me throw up.
things you would actually say out of your mouth.
Luckily, Nonfiction Brand
Actually say out of your mouth.
Luckily, Nonfiction Brand podcast listeners, I could edit these episodes because what you didn't hear me do was throw up after
Hear me do. You do.
do was
Didn't hear me do.
podcast listeners, I could edit these episodes because what you didn't hear me do was throw up after
Didn't hear me do. Didn't hear me do.
podcast listeners, I could edit these episodes because what you didn't hear me do was throw up after hearing that garbage. But let me tell you, I know exactly where you're coming from, which is it's not just about creating a Bible that has our story and everyone has to quote chapter and verse on. It's no. Now it requires interpretation. So when we're talking to someone on the phone, this is how you answer a phone call in a way that supports our story. You know, this is, and it's, again, you're not in a way that supports our story. Again, you're not tying people's hands. You're giving them what they need to successfully convey that story. So it sounds like you hit major touch points all along that kind of funnel path, going from
that's
the
the
very
idea,
beginning all
right?
the way
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. How do you get someone interested in the first place? Once they're interested, what do you say to them to continue the story that started with how you got them interested? And then once they feel like they want to work with you, what do you need to do next? How do you talk to them there? And, you know, again, I always just think through.
Get rid of that and leave a little bit of gap there.
What do you need to do next? How do you talk to them there? You know, again, I always just think through, like, how do people actually, like, how do you take that big idea but put it into words in a way that people actually talk, and you're not stuck talking about the galvanization of the human spirit, because no one would say that.
Right. And again, you listening to last week's episode, you'll remember that Rajiv listening to last week's episode, you'll remember that Rajiv is a very listening to last week's episode, you'll remember that Rajiv is a very big Lin-Manuel Miranda fan, in the form of the musical Hamilton and the structure of it, the story of it, the drama of it, every aspect thereof. And I want to point out how smart that was. Aspect thereof. And I want to point out how smart that was to take that as a frame for what you do, and kind of take the
I'm struggling for my thought here, but
for what you do, and take the frame for what you do, and take the very amorphous you do, and take the very amorphous idea of storytelling and turn it into concrete structure. That, guess who gets that? Guess who wants concrete structure? Engineers, scientists, numbers people. They don't want the scientists, numbers people. They don't want the puffery. They want the structure, and that's really smart. But I want to go and flip the script the script a little bit and stop talking about who you serve and start talking about you and your.
So this is where I'm going to put promo.
But I want to go.
So this is a radical change in subject. So it becomes a great place to plug in. Where's my promo? My book promo, which is a good minute and change of blah blah. I want to see just, do I have an EQ setting for this? I'm going to turn it off. It should already be EQ'd to death. Oh, it was off.
They don't want the puffery. They want the structure. And that's really.
This episode of the Nonfiction Brand podcast, that's really what's
really smart.
A little fast.
Structure. And that's really smart.
This episode of the. All right. Okay. This toward the back. Episode of the Nonfiction Brand podcast is brought to you by my new book, Nonfiction Brand. Discover, craft, and communicate the completely true, completely you brand you already are, now available on Amazon.com. Too many people for too many years have labored in obscurity. Why? Because that's the way it's always been. Work for someone else and remain nameless, letting others take credit for your hard work. But in today's hyper-connected everything is media world, that's all changed. In 1997, Tom Peters outlined the tenets of a new concept, personal branding. In fact, regardless of where you are in your own brand building journey. To get your copy, head on over to Amazon.com and search Nonfiction Brand. And let's get you all the credit you deserve for the completely true, completely you brand you already are.
But I want to go.
That can come in just a little bit faster.
But I want to go and flip the script a little bit and stop talking about who you serve.
But I want to go and flip the script. I don't need that gap in there.
But I want to go and flip the script a little bit and stop talking about who you serve and start talking about you and your personal brand. Because, again, doing a little research into the background information you gave me, you're out there actively seeking speaking opportunities, presentation opportunities. I'm sure some of them, maybe most of them, are lead generation type things for your business. Some of them, maybe most of them, are lead generation type things for your business.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing some of it's related to the fact that there's a little bit of, let's call it Broadway lead. That there's a little bit of, let's call it Broadway lead in you personally. That there's a presentational side of you that cannot be denied. Am I right about that?
You have assessed me accurately. I actually think one of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my life was never taking like a formal theater training. In fact, in many my life was never taking like a formal theater training. In fact, in many ways, formal theater training. In fact, in many ways, I do believe my future holds actually getting into acting of some kind. The ways I've had to do
Rid of the
actually getting into acting of some kind. The ways I've had to do it manually on my own, like I'm also a hip hop artist, and so there's ways I've had to do it manually on my own, like I'm also a hip hop artist, and so there's obviously artistic nature. Obviously, artistic nature.
There's obviously artistic nature.
And so there's obviously artistic natures to that, and some hip hop artist, and so there's obviously artistic natures to that, and some stage presence involved as well. But that kind of mindset is what I bring even to the business realm, and I've keynoted conferences before.
Like,
That kind of mindset is what I bring even to the business realm, and I've keynoted conferences before where I actually open
where I
keynoted conferences before where I actually open by before where I actually open by I have performed a song from Hamilton. Actually open by performed a song from Hamilton, and
opened, I performed a song from Hamilton.
Before where I actually performed a song from Hamilton, and then I've used that to say, well, if we look at how this song is structured, we can follow this closely to say how you should pitch your company. To say how you should pitch your company. And
Well, let me
tell you, like, it's awesome.
All right, so I tried to jump in, get rid of that, clean that up.
How you should pitch your company. And I can tell you, like, it's awesome.
Well, let me ask you this. Can you give us a few seconds of the fresh, can you give us a few seconds? Let me ask you this. Can you give us, can you give,
let's see.
well, let me ask you this. Can you give us a few seconds?
This.
Well, let me ask you this. Can you give us a few seconds of the, well, let me ask you this. Can you give us a few seconds of the fresh, I can't say Fresh Prince. Can you give us a few seconds?
It's me. Fresh Prince. Fresh Prince.
Awesome.
Well, let me ask you this. Can you give us a few seconds of the Fresh Prince of Sass? Of Sass.
Aha. Yes. So this is a video I just randomly had an idea for a couple of years ago where I remixed the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yep.
And I put it on LinkedIn and it got way more popular than I thought, but it goes something like this. Now this is a story all about how your business flip turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there. I'll tell you how it can increase your revenue share.
Yeah. There you go. You know, but that just makes it, yeah. There you go. But that just makes it entertaining and interesting, right? But it also points out the fact that you've got this interesting, right? But it also points out the fact that you've got this entertainer performer streak in you that is absolutely core to who you as a person and a professional absolutely are.
Just the whole point of nonfiction branding. Know who you are so you can be it.
As a person and a professional, absolutely are.
I'm glad you've asked about this stuff.
You as a person and a professional absolutely are.
I'm glad you've asked about this stuff because I think I want everyone to know is that me creating startup
hype man.
This stuff because I think I want everyone to know is that me creating Startup Hype Man was almost for myself this like almost for myself this like its own inevitability, its own like undeniable force that was trying to break through. Because for years I kept thinking to myself, I have to separate these different parts of me.
Ooh, this is a good quote too. I like this.
Trying to break through. Because for years, its own inevitability. Me creating start.
So let's see. This is 1606.
I'm glad you've asked about this stuff because I think what's I want everyone to know is that about this stuff because I think what's I want to
Because that's a weird word in there. Get rid of it. Shorten things up and make it clearer and more understandable.
I'm glad you've asked about this stuff because I want everyone to know is that me creating Startup Hype Man was almost for myself this like its own inevitability.
Self.
Almost for myself this like its own inevitability. Its own like undeniable force that was trying to break through. Because for years I kept thinking to myself, I have to separate these myself, I have to separate these different parts of me. To myself, I have to separate these different parts of me. And with Startup Hype Man, I said, well, I actually am going to reckon. And with Startup Hype Man, I said, well, I actually am going to reconcile these different identities, quote unquote, and make it my brand and make it the thing people, that I
That
thing people
see that weird zoom artifacty. Why did you didn't say it this way, I don't think. People.
And make it the thing people, that I put out there because I love it. And I'm going to have the most fun doing it this way. And it's going to be different. Some people are going to hate it. And I'm okay with that because I probably wouldn't enjoy working with them anyways. But there are going to be people who gravitate towards this. And so rather than trying to like suppress and be like, you know what, the rapper side of me is this thing over here. I'm also a yoga instructor. Right? The yoga side of me is this thing over here. That it's like, hey, it's all me, but it's also, it all guides my philosophy and my approach with Startup Hype Man.
All right. It's a little long. So it's almost a minute. And that might be too long. Well, 17:05. That's a minute long. Definitely. But I could tighten things up.
So it all guides my philosophy and my approach with Startup Hype Man.
So let's trim this up.
Trying to break through. Because for years, I kept thinking to myself, I have to separate these different parts of me. And with Startup Hype Man, I said, well, I actually am going to reconcile these different identities, quote unquote, and make it my brand. And make it the thing people.
In my brain.
And make it my brand and make it the thing people, that I.
Yeah, that was screwed up.
And make it my brand and make it the thing people, and make it my brand and make it the thing people, that I put out there because I love it. And I'm. And make it the thing people, that I put out there because I love it. And I'm not.
There. stuff out of the way.
That I put out there because I love it, and I'm
put out there.
People, that I put out there because I love it, and I'm gonna have the most fun doing it this way, and it's gonna be different. Some people are gonna. Some people are gonna hate it.
There it goes again. Some people are going to hate it, and I'm okay with that because I probably wouldn't enjoy working with them anyways. But there are going to be people who gravitate towards this. And so gravitate towards this. 1648. That's where I can cut it. Because I probably wouldn't enjoy working with them anyways. But there are going to be people who gravitate towards this. And so rather than trying to a big gap there, that's a hint to myself that this is the clip or one of the clips I need to listen to. Anyways, but there are going to be people who gravitate towards this. And so rather than trying to like suppress and be like, you know what, the rapper side of me is this thing over here. I'm also a yoga instructor, right? The yoga side of me is this thing over here. Instead, it's like, hey, it's all me, but it's also, it all guides my philosophy and my approach with Startup Hype Man. And my approach with Startup Hype Man.
Oh my God, Nonfiction Brand podcast listeners, have you heard him just describe the, what I like to call the Nonfiction Brand philosophy of being completely true, completely you, regardless of the fact that you might have to have an LLC name on an invoice? Regardless of the fact that you might have to have an LLC name on an invoice?
Right.
Is there any separation between Rajiv and Startup? Separation between
between, I think this burp. I think that's a burp. Is there any separation between?
Is there any separation between Rajiv and Is there any separation between Rajiv and Startup Hype Man? I'm going to say no.
No. I mean, it's literally, it's like, I mean, when I'm not Startup Hype Man, quote unquote, I might just be slightly more casual.
Right.
No. I mean, it's literally, it's like, I mean, when I'm not Startup Hype Man, quote unquote, I might be slightly more casual or something. But even then, you're still 99.9% of it is the exact same. And I mean, even today, I'm wearing a wrestling suit.
And today,
9.9% of it is the exact same. I mean, even today, I'm wearing a wrestling sweater, so a pro wrestling sweater. So that at least should get. I mean, even today, I'm wearing a wrestling sweater, pro wrestling sweater. So that
did have an
I mean, even today, I'm wearing a wrestling sweater, a pro wrestling sweater. So that at least should give it off. And this is Startup Hype Man being represented here.
Well, exactly. And you hit on something.
Well, exactly. Well, I say well too much. Well.
Man being represented here.
Exactly. And you hit on something that you kind of said of 30 seconds ago. Not everyone's going to get it. Not everyone's going to like it. Not everyone's going to want to, talk to you, engage with you, buy your services, have a drink with you. But that's okay. And it sounds like you're personally okay with that fact that you don't have to be one size fits all. Everybody has to like me. And you're instead saying, and the other thing you said that was really very that you don't have to be one size fits all. Everybody like me. Oh, and the other thing you said that was
Oh, and the other
fact that you don't have to be one size fits all. Everybody has to like me. The other thing you said that was really very, I think, wise and astute. The other thing you said that was really very, I think, wise and astute was, frankly, I wouldn't want to work with those people anyway. And that's the key.
Well, it is because
I wouldn't want to work with those people
I
anyway.
wouldn't want to work.
Frankly, I wouldn't want to work.
You can also make yourself sound smarter by editing. Yes, this is my trick.
Was, frankly, wouldn't want to work with those people anyway.
I wouldn't, frankly.
Was, frankly, I wouldn't want to work with those people.
I wouldn't
Was, frankly, I wouldn't want to work with those people anyway.
it is because I'll tell you. So that Fresh Prince remix that I've created, right? Again, I just had the idea one day and I put the video up on LinkedIn, got way more exposure than I thought it was going to. And it's driven a lot of revenue in the last couple of years. And the people who have gotten that as their first touch point end up my most satisfied customers.
Exactly.
And the people I want to work with, right? Because
that his little laughter didn't make a whole lot of sense there. So I'm cutting it out.
Customers.
Exactly.
And the people I want to work with, right? Because I was talking to a mentor of mine. I want to work with, right?
I want to work with, right?
Exactly.
And the people I want to work with. I was talking to a mentor of mine and he was like, in a way, it's kind of like you like bring out like their inner artist. And I was like, well, yeah, that's a good way to put it. He's like, which means they have to see some version of an artist inside themselves first. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I didn't think about it like that, but I guess you're right. And so that's what I guess what makes sense here is like, if someone gravitates towards me because of the content I'm putting out, because of the way I go about things, they see something in themselves, some version of an artist inside themselves that they want to break through.
Some
out because of the way I go about things, they see something in themselves, some version of an artist inside themselves. See something in themselves, some version of an artist inside themselves that they want to break through. And that's the person I want to work with.
Well, exactly, because you're not over-promising or under-delivering. You are perfectly promising who you are, what you do, and how you do it in a way that makes them go, oh, wow, I wish I could do that. Oh, wow.
There's a big breath in there. And the way to get rid of that breath is cut it out altogether.
Or what you do and how you do it in a way that makes them go, oh, wow, I wish I could do that. I bet you could help bring that out of me. Maybe I'll never be as good, but at least I'm reaching for something in a positive way rather than being fed a veneer that doesn't fit or a suit off the rack, you know? It sounds to me that it sounds to me like you approach people. It sounds to me.
Okay, it sounds.
No, it sounds to me like you approach people from it's
from Tighten it up a little. Get rid of that.
Near that doesn't fit, or a suit off the rack, you know?
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you approach people from let me understand. Let me then craft. Let me then craft. And then let me help you tell your story in the most effective way possible, with the big proviso that we're always coming at things from an audience first perspective.
Right. And I'll tell you, like,
Audience first perspective.
right. And I'll tell you, like, with these sales teams that I work with, when we create that deck, that presentation deck, I'll write the speaker notes how I would do it. And I'll record a video, or I'll do a live pitch for them, be like, hey, here's how I do it. But then I make them all write their own script. Like, I'm like, mine's just a guide. You got to follow like the story arc here, but you got to figure out, how do you relate to this? And what's your personal anecdote you share on slide 4, whatever it might be? Because these are my words. My words are not your words. And it's only going to work if they're your words. It's only going to feel natural and authentic, not to overuse that word, but it's only going to feel authentic and something that the other people,
there was an
it's only going to feel authentic and something that the other people, your audience wants to listen to, if it's your words that they can understand they're hearing.
Oh, yeah. Amen, brother. I mean, there are only 2 writers that you don't rewrite: William Shakespeare and the raft of people who wrote whatever religious text you care. Rewrite William Shakespeare and the raft of people who wrote whatever religious text you care to follow. Because any other thing, and I'm not kidding you. I was watching David Letterman, thing, and I'm not kidding you. I was watching David Letterman. I'm not kidding you. I was watching David Letterman. My guest needs no introduction on, I think, Netflix. And Robert Downey Jr. was on, and he was talking about how he, as a 24-year-old actor, would come into top tier A+ level directors, the new script. 24-year-old actor would come into top tier A+ level directors with a new script that he wrote to correct the bad script. And is that arrogance? Maybe. But the big thing he was doing was, I'm pointing out this has to come out of my mouth in a way that is 100% believable. And consequently, there needs to be some flexibility in the script or the pitch or whatever you're preparing, so that it can come out with the sincerity and, dare I say it, authenticity that we all know really attracts people and gets them.
Really attracts people.
That we all know really attracts people and gets them to convert the way we'd like them to.
Attracts people and gets them to convert the way like.
Authenticity that we all know really attracts people and gets them to convert the way we'd like them to.
Which is actually why I think it's important to have some baseline script.
Absolutely.
Because then you have something to improvise off of. If the entire thing is improv, I would argue you can't. If the entire thing is improv, I would argue you can't be that authentic, sincere, even though people will be like, well, no, it's the natural thing coming out. But if you're talking while simultaneously trying to construct if you're talking while simultaneously trying to construct the words that are supposed to come next, because you totally are freestyling this. Totally are freestyling this. You're not going to deliver the best version of yourself.
Well, let me tell you, anybody who ever studied
deliver the best version of yourself.
Let me tell you, anybody who ever studied
Deliver the best version of yourself.
Let me tell you, anybody who ever studied the presentation styling of Steve Jobs knows that he rehearsed more than he rehearsed more than
That he
styling of Steve Jobs knows that he rehearsed more than anybody to get his very loose but not loose at all structure done. I mean, and that's what all act said all structure done. I mean, and that's what all actors understand, which is it's all about the process of preparation. If you do not prepare, and by the way, conversely, the biggest fear of actors when they have nightmares is the biggest fear that act. And by the way, conversely, the biggest fear.
Oops. Conversely, I think it was right about there. I can clean this up once I get this closed up. This restatement.
Not prepare. And by the way, conversely, the biggest fear that the process of preparation. If you do not prepare, by the way, conversely, the biggest fear that actors
By the way,
understand, which is it's all about the process of preparation. By the way, conversely,
I can say conversely.
and that's what all actors understand, which is it's all about the process of preparation. Conversely, the biggest fear that actors have when they have nightmares is totally related to I didn't rehearse enough and I forgot my lines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, when I did
my lines.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, when I did a TED Talk several years ago, or a TEDx, I should say. TED Talk several years ago, or a TEDx, I should say. When I initially got like the, hey, like you're gonna, the call to be like, you're in. Hey, like you're gonna, the call to be like, you're in. My initial thought was like, oh, I'm a good presenter. I can win.
Getting close to the end, gotta mute my music bed so I can continue.
The call to be like, you're in.
This.
My initial thought was like, oh, I'm a good presenter. I can wing this. And then I was like, oh, no. And I probably practiced that thing. Oh, no. And I probably practiced that thing. I mean, at least. And I probably practiced that thing, I mean, at least 25, 30 times the week of, and then just the morning of another 5 times. And it's, the morning of another 5 times. And it's, had I not, you would have had a presentation. The morning of another 5 times. Had I not, you would have had a presentation that was a lot of, okay, so what's next? You would have heard a lot of that. Had I not, you would have had a presentation that was a lot of, okay, so what's next? You would have heard a lot of that.
Yeah.
I'll also tell you too, on that note, I often think of that.
Yeah.
I'll also tell you too, on that note, I often think it's actually almost like that note. I often think it's actually
I like having that.
I often think
Rid of that extra.
Yeah.
I'll also tell you too, on that note, I often think it's actually almost like you too, on that note, I often think it's actually almost like better or more fun to work with introverts than extroverts, because I'm a hardcore extrovert. With introverts than extroverts. I'm a hardcore extrovert, but I'm susceptible. What I've noticed, and I'm representative of other people who
What I noticed.
work with introverts than extroverts. I'm a hardcore extrovert.
Get rid of that extra, at least.
Work with introverts than extroverts. I'm a hardcore extrovert.
Boy, there were like three.
Fun to work with introverts than extroverts. I'm a hardcore extrovert. What I've noticed, and I'm representative of other people who are extroverts for the most part as well, us extroverts who like having that spotlight, us extroverts who like having that spotlight, that kind of thing, we believe ourselves to believe, because we believe ourselves to be good at this thing, presenting, that we don't have to practice.
Yeah.
Introverts are oftentimes so terrified of the idea of having to present in front of people or know something, they will over prepare beyond belief, and they end up a lot of times they end up more successful because they understand the importance of preparation, and because in their mind, winging it is not an option.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm reminded of Brene.
Is not an option.
Yeah. And I'm reminded of Brene Brown, her, what was her Netflix special?
I don't remember the name, but I have seen what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Well, in it, she talks about the fact that she was going to give, what was her Netflix special? On her, what was her Netflix special?
I don't remember the name, but I have seen what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
well, in it, she talks about the fact that she was going to give her first TEDx Houston talk, and she just decided the day of to basically, I'm not going to do what I always do. But she knew her material cold because she's a scientist. She had been studying shame and all that stuff forever. So she was able to do it because she was able and all that stuff forever. So she was able to do it because she knew her stuff backwards, forwards, upside down.
And she'd probably done enough similar
backwards, forwards, upside down.
And she'd probably done enough like similar, smaller talks like that on the topic. I'll tell
Plus-
you too, like, yeah, go ahead.
Plus, she's a professor, so she's in.
Similar, smaller talks like that on the topic.
Plus, she's a professor, so she's in.
Smaller talks like that on the topic.
Plus, she's a professor, so she's in front of an audience all the time.
Yeah, it's not necessarily like a new thing for her to be in front of a room. But I'll tell you, like, it's not necessarily like a new thing for her to be in front of a room. But I'll tell you, like, not necessarily like a new thing for her to be in front of a room. But I'll tell you, like, and this is what I do with my own stuff, but also whenever I'm working with companies, I'm always like, I always intentionally whenever I'm working with companies, I'm always like, I always intentionally figure out how do I teach this within a framework so that it's not about memorizing word for word. It is that you know the framework. So if you slip up, you can mentally tell yourself, where am I at in this framework? What's supposed to come next in the framework? When I did my test in this framework, what's supposed to come next in the framework?
Next.
So if you slip up, you can mentally tell yourself, where am I at in this framework? What's supposed to come next? When
Next.
I did my TED
Next.
tell yourself, where am I at in this framework? What's supposed to come next? When I did my tell yourself, where am I at in this framework? What's supposed to come next? When I did my TED talk, yes, I scripted it word for word. And honestly, I probably ended up sticking close enough to it word for word. And honestly, I probably ended up sticking close enough to it word for word, maybe like 9.
Sticking.
And honestly, I probably ended up sticking close enough to it word for word, maybe like 95% like in total of what I had written down. But there's a part, I don't know, like 7-8 minutes into it, where I actually forgot what I was supposed to say next. I don't know if unless you know I'm telling you this, I don't think you could when you see the video on YouTube, like I don't think you'd be able to tell. I know it happened, but I remember in that moment, and I'll tell you, in my head, it felt like 20 seconds. In reality, it was probably like 0.2 seconds.
Right.
I was like, even though I didn't remember in that moment the exact word next, I went back and I said, okay, where am I at in the framework? What's supposed to happen next in the framework? And that's what got me back on track.
And that's why you have to have that framework. You have to have that basis. And you have to have a story that's crafted by someone who can take you through it if you can't yourself, which is a great way for me to segue into asking Rajiv to tell us again, what does Startup Hype Man do, especially in the startup space for companies?
Of course, it's all about helping craft narratives that don't suck at the end of the day. So as the leader of a company, you've got a particular vision for what you want this thing to represent in the market. It's probably not getting
Get rid of the
for what you want this thing to represent in the market. It's probably not getting translated into pitches, into messaging, into presentations, et cetera. I come in and help figure that out. I help map your vision to the boots on the ground messaging through a scalable narrative process so that not only can your team today do it well, or you yourself today do it well, but as new people get added on, they can step in today do it well, but as new people get added on, they can step in and have just as much
step in. Step in.
As new people get added on, they can step in and have just as much success. because it is a scalable narrative. It's not dependent on the whims of one person. It is, kind of this living, breathing pulse of your company.
It's kind of the same page for everyone to get on and stay on so that you so that you're consistently and stay on so that
Off. Hey, bud. Got a little dog coming over here. What's that little dog coming over here for?
it's kind of the same page for everyone to get on and stay on so that you're constantly telling
Stay on.
everyone to get on and stay on so that you're consistently for everyone to get on and stay on so that you're constantly telling the same story.
That's one of my happiest, or the parts that one of the pieces of feedback that I happiest, or the parts that
Yes.
one of the pieces of feedback that
One of the happiest. One of the pieces of.
that's one of my happiest, one of the pieces of feedback that I always feel best about is when someone will say, "Hey, our marketing and our sales and our outbound." Someone will say, "Hey, our marketing and our sales and our outbound are all aligned now."
Yeah.
We all have that. We all understand the same thing. We're not doing one thing and the other people are saying that's not going to work. There's not a conflict of interest here. Everyone is on the same page. And I think when doing one thing and the other people are saying that's not going to work, the best about is when someone will say, "Hey, our marketing and our sales and our outbound are all aligned now."
Yeah.
We all have that.
Yeah, this section, there's a lot of weird.
We all have that. We all understand the same thing. We're not doing one thing and the other people are saying that's not going to work. There's not a conflict of interest here. Everyone is on.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Is bought into the same narrative, and therefore you're because everyone is bought into the same. I always feel best about is when someone will say, "Hey, our marketing and our sales and our outbound are all aligned now."
Yeah.
Because everyone is bought.
Because everyone has bought into the same.
And our sales and our outbound are all aligned now.
Yeah.
Because everyone is bought into the same narrative, and therefore you're doing things to help one another, not. And therefore you're doing things to help one another, not either unintentionally or intentionally hold people back.
Yeah, that's great. So if people wanted to get a hold of you or contact you, what's the best way for them to actually get contact with you? What's the best way for them to actually get contact with you?
First thing I would say is if you didn't listen to last week's part 1 of this conversation, rewind, go back and listen to that.
Amen, brother.
And then come back and listen to this. And then
Amen, brother.
And then come back and listen to this. And then come back and listen.
See that weird wow? Get rid of it.
Amen, brother.
And then come back and listen to this. If you want to connect with me again, LinkedIn is the place. Just search
Got
Rod.
a in there.
And LinkedIn is the.
You can start to recognize the shape of people's uhs. Makes it easier to spot them once you hear them.
If you want to connect with me, if you want to connect.
See, there's another right there. That was a different shaped He had more energy on that.
And then come back and listen to this. If you want to connect with me again, LinkedIn is the place. Just search Raj Nation, RAJ Nation, all one word. I'll show up. On Instagram at.
Oop. Hold on. Dang it. Almost done.
Nation, all one word, I'll show up. On Instagram at Nation, RAJ Nation, all one word, I'll show up. On Instagram at Startup Hype Man, and I mentioned it last week. If you want to, we talked.
Say,
If you want to, we talked about a lot over these last 2 weeks. One of the things that I talked about a lot over these last 2 weeks. One of the things that I think is really helpful as a step one is figuring out your elevator pitch. That's always the first part of my process. And I have a very specific formula for that. I call KPASA. And I've got a KPASA pitch guide for you where it explains the formula and then breaks down some prompts for you to figure it out yourself. That is available. Figure it out yourself. That is available at startuphypeman.com/DP. Again, startuphypeman. That is available at startuphypeman.com/DP. Again, startuphypeman.com/DP. And I think that'll be an especially helpful way to carry these episodes forward, especially if you're like me and you listen to podcasts while working out or grocery shopping and you didn't sit down at a coffee table with a notebook while listening to this.
And I hope you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you want that thing to carry beyond, this audio that's in your ear right now, startuphypeman.com/D.
got that.
This audio that's in your ear right now, startuphypeman.com/DP. DP. That's in your ear right now, startuphypeman.com/DP.
Well, I want to.
I want to listen to something for a second. My EQ, I'm not digging. Oh, maybe.
/DP.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. What a treat to talk to someone who's clearly, even though he's in the startup space, where stories are very, very much in infancy stage almost, but you're doing it the right way, which is you're finding out the truth about the company, its people, their processes, systems, and products and services, and then creating a cogent story that always, always, always considers what the audience needs first. I think that's really, really smart.
Thank you. And I appreciate you having me and kind of really setting my neurons on fire for this conversation. It was a lot of fun the last couple of weeks.
Well, thank you so much. I'm DP Knudten for the I'm DP Knudten. I'm DP Knudten.
Screwed that up. We'll do it live.
I'm DP. Well, thank you so much. I'm DP Knudten. Of course, I'm DP Knudten. Well, thank you so much. Of course.
Of course. Very much. I'm DP.
Well, thank you so much. Of course, I'm DP Knudten. Of course, I'm DP Knudten for the Nonfiction Brand Podcast, and I would love for you to like, subscribe, refer, and review this podcast to others, but most of all, could you refer and review this podcast to others, but most of all, could...
Oh, that was weird.
I'm DP Knudten for the Nonfiction Brand Podcast, and I would love for you to like, subscribe, refer podcast to others, but most of all, could
Refer
this podcast to others. This podcast. And I would love for you to like, subscribe, refer this podcast to others. But most of all, could you do me a favor and review it wherever you get your fine podcasts for free? That's it for me this week. As again, I'll say it again. I'm DP, but he is. As again, I'll say it. As again,
As I'll say it again. Sometimes I don't say my outro the way I should, and I have to cobble it together.
For free. That's it for me this week. As I'll say it again. I'm DP, but that's it for me this week. I'll say it again. I'm DP, but he is
Rajiv Nation, Raj Nation.
I'm DP, but he is
Rajiv, Raj Nation, Nathan.
And I'll be coming back at you next week. Bye-bye.
I think we're done.
And we are clear.
All
right, man. Yeah,
That's so
no.
funny.
Delete. All right, so the final processing includes breaking down the live area there, but first I gotta get my music, my outro music. Give that a listen and maybe do a little bit of final shaping. You can see. Preemptive. Here we go.
Fire for this conversation. It was a lot of fun the last couple of weeks.
Well, thank you so much. Of course, I'm DP Knudten for the Nonfiction Brand podcast, and I would love for you to like, subscribe, refer this podcast to others, but most of all, could you do me a favor and review it wherever you get your fine podcasts for free? That's it for me this week. I'll say it again. I'm DP, but he is
Rajiv, Raj Nation, Nathan.
And I'll be
Give him a little bit of a goose. Not too much. A little bit.
I'll say it again. I'm DP, but he is
Rajiv, Raj Nation, Nathan.
And I'll be coming back at you next week. Bye-bye.
All right, so now what do? I have got to actually share this export song to disk as an AIFF file. And I got to make sure I'm in the correct podcast folder, 138. Yep, 138. Oh, it's interesting. These are numbered incorrectly. Correct that there. Don't want. And that'll say as an AIFF file, which is not compressed or a lossless. And then I'll show you what I do to actually process it into an MP3 file that I will upload to Podbean for distribution throughout the entire world. Now, this takes a little bit of time to do, so I'm going to drink some water. This is bouncing the native files to a mixed AIFF file all the way over in my folder. I will then take that AIFF file, open it up in Audacity, and perform 3 things that I can't really do in GarageBand. But guess what? Audacity is free too. So Cheap Dad here feels really, really good about that. I can get a pro quality sounding thing for literally no cost for software. All right, so I'm quitting out of GarageBand. going over here, you can see the AIFF file. I'm actually going to renumber these files so I don't mess up. And then the AIFF file is the one I want to deal with. Sorry. Go back here, do a little open with Audacity. Again, Audacity is freeware that works with Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. So you have no excuse watching live. Oh, that one. That's a thing. All right. So you can see this right now. First thing I'm going to do is grab all of this. And I'm making a mental note that Command A tells me it's 30 minutes and 36 seconds long. First thing I'm going to do is an effect called Truncate Silence. This will actually shorten gaps that are below minus 30 decibels by 40%, making it 60% of the original 100% space. So it's like, and all that does is it's like using really fine sandpaper to smooth things out. So watch what happens. Right now, 30 minutes, 36 seconds. What happens with Truncate Silence? My guess, it's going to take out about a minute and 20 seconds worth of dead air. Let's see if I'm close. I said a minute 20. It works its way through. Do. Bingo. 29:21. What was it? It was 30:36. Well, look at that. A minute and 10 seconds or something. Nice. All right, the other effect I'm going to do is compressor. Now, I've never ever touched these. These are the default settings in Audacity for compressor. And what it does is it compresses the file like a panini press. The stuff that's low, it brings up. The stuff that's high, it kind of evens things out. See what happens? Yeah, that's pretty impressive right there. You can see the entire track went from this to this, which is great for audio, for vocal audio podcasts. This is not great for music, but it's great for podcasts. And then the other effect I'm going to do is loudness normalization. This will make sure that the perceived loudness of the entire podcast is minus 16 LUFS. Now, what does LUF stand for? Loudness unit, blah, 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 I don't know. But put it this way, this is just a final thing I do just so that it goes out at the right level. It's not too loud, not too soft. And here's the thing, Apple Podcasts and Spotify and stuff like that will automatically do this themselves. But this is me saving myself a little time and saving them a little hassle by getting it to the right broadcast level. I then export as MP3. I make sure I'm in the right folder or save it to the right folder. Right there. I'm going to save it as MP3. Oh, but I am also going to load some ID tags or ID3 tags. I'm going to update the track number. I'll save that over my old file, Nonfiction Brand Podcast XML.xml. I'm going to replace that. And then I'm going to hit OK. And this is going to turn it into an MP3 that is optimized for distribution via the normal podcast channels. Seriously. And the thing is, once this is done going through everything, I'm going to do a quality check. And the way I do that is kind of fun. Well, it's kind of fun for me. I hop on my Xbox One and I play typically Call of Duty, put it on a zombies map or something like that, and I just shoot at zombies as I listen subconsciously to the podcast. I've already listened to it very closely as I did the editing, but now subconsciously I have to listen for things like, oh, wow, there's a really loud breath there. Why? Because the compressor compresses the breath and brings it up. So I might need to go back in there and edit that out. But here we are. Everything's been done. You can see there's the MP3. If I do the old...
So you are so gracious to have created a one-shot device that listeners to the Nonfiction Brand podcast can go online and download right now at, give us that URL.
Startuphypeman.com.
So you are so gracious to have created a one-sheet device that listeners to the Nonfiction Brand podcast can go online and download right now at, give us that URL.
Startuphypeman.com/DP.
As in David Paul. Definitely check that out, because I think...
Well, you don't need to watch me quality check this, but the final step is always listen to it. And, you know, if you really want to be diligent, listen to it twice on 2 different audio sources. Like, I'll listen to it over speakers, and then I'll pop in my AirPods or some other earbuds or something like that. Or sometimes I'll just play it on my phone speakers, because back in the day when I would do a lot of radio spots at professional studios, the last thing we always did was take it off the wonderful thousands and thousands of dollars worth of speakers and put it on this little $90 Auratone, I think was the brand name, speaker, just so you could hear it on essentially a crappy speaker. Because mixing for the use case that most of your listeners will not be using, i.e. high-end audio equipment, is a mistake. You got to listen to it in the way that most people will hear it, which is over earbuds of questionable quality, or in their laundry room as they're doing laundry, or working outside, or mowing the lawn. They aren't going to hear it over the best sounding stuff. So don't optimize for the best, optimize for the lowest common denominator. This is an audio vocal podcast, not a symphonic recording at the Berlin Symphony. Just saying. Well, that's it for me today. I've got my podcast done. There's still some stuff I have to do before it goes live on Monday, but I'll do that tomorrow, because this is the weekend. I should get out there and play with my dogs and be with my family. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm DP Knudten for the Nonfiction Brand podcast, obviously, which comes out every single Monday at 3 a.m. Central Time or Eastern Time, not sure which. And it's episode 138 this week with Rajiv Nathan, or Raj Nation, of LinkedIn fame. Check him out on LinkedIn, also at his website, which you've heard cited multiple times during the course of this podcast editing session. That's it for me today. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.